Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Guys, can we agree? Can we agree on something? Yeah, the bullet started World War One, but I don't think that they knew it would start World War One. You know, and so when I think of like the main belligerents of World War One, I don't think of Serbia or Austria. I don't really because it could have stayed a regional conflict like a bunch of other regional conflicts that could have easily sparked a world war with all of the alliance set up, and this one just happened to be it, I think. And so I don't really right. Anyways, let's do it. Preemptive like simple history, awesome. The bullet that started World War One. Let's do it. My name's Connor, guys. Hope you're all doing well.
Gavrilo Princip and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. On Sunday, June 28, 1914, Serbian nationalist Nedeljko Čebrinović threw a bomb at the back of a car carrying Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The bomb rolled off and wounded around 20 people behind the Archduke instead. Not the best start to an assassination that would lead to World War I. In 1914, Europe looked a little different from today. Most of the continent was divided between three major powers: the German Empire, Russian Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, with France, Italy, and a few other countries squashed in. It was that last one, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and its strained relations with its southern neighbor, Serbia, that is key to understanding why the assassination occurred. Serbia had grown to detest Austria-Hungary after it occupied its neighbor called Bosnia-Herzegovina, first in 1878 and formally in 1908. Bosnia-Herzegovina contained a sizable Serb minority and was therefore believed by Serbian nationalists that it ought to be part of their own country. Serbia overthrew their
Why are they acting like chimpanzees? Like, okay, sorry.
Nationalists that it ought to be part of their own country. Serbia overthrew their pro-Austro-Hungary rulers some years earlier in 1903 and had established a government that wasn't too fond of the empire. By 1914, these tensions only increased as Serb and Bosnian Serb nationalists stoked the flames of the slowly growing fire by creating militant organizations to obtain their territorial objectives. And Franz Ferdinand's political desires, significant as he was next in line as the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, only fueled their anger. Ferdinand was in favor of a more unified empire, where its Slavic citizens in southeastern Europe would get better political representation. While sounding great on paper, to Serbian nationalists it would accomplish nothing but weakening their goals for a separate, larger Serbian nation, and so sought
And a coastline of its own?
to prevent it. In May 1911, the Black Hand was formed, although back then it was better known as Unification or Death. It was a secret revolutionary organization whose name tied in with its ultimate goal: to break the southern provinces from the Austro-Hungarian Empire and create an enlarged, supposedly ethnically united kingdom of Serbia. Although not part of the Black Hand, young, poor Bosnian Serb Gavrilo Princip, who had been radicalized since his youth, shared their sentiments and had befriended other radicals determined to change the tide of history, later being introduced to the Young Bosnia group. Like many others, he believed Serbia had a moral duty to free Yugoslavs still under Austro-Hungarian control. Princip was just 19 when he met other Bosnian Serbs like himself after traveling to and living in Belgrade. Some of these later co-conspirators were students, others were already revolutionary exiles because of their socialist beliefs. Over the last 10 years leading up to 1914, there had been multiple attempts on government officials' lives by other nationalists.
I don't like him anymore. No, sorry.
There had been multiple attempts on government officials' lives by other nationalists. The most notable of this was Bogdan Zarajic, who attempted to assassinate General Marijan Varashani, governor of Bosnia in Sarajevo in 1910. He shot 5 times in his direction before turning the gun on himself. This is one of the events that spurred on Princip and his co-conspirators just a few years later. In 1913, relations between Bosnia and the rest of the empire had reached an all-time low. A state of emergency was declared by General Oskar Peturek, leading to the dissolution of the Bosnian parliament, the imposition of martial law, and the shutdown of Serbian cultural and educational societies. This, of course, only incited Princip's rage further.
Do you guys agree that this could, maybe I'm wrong, okay? I'm not trying to like sway people. Okay. That like we could easily be thinking about be learning about a very obscure assassination between two countries in the Balkans in the early 1900s, and it didn't have to be connected to a world war, right?
And he formed a group with 2 other friends, Nedeljko Čebrinović and Trifko Grebiš, whose goal was to ultimately follow the earlier Zarajić's example, but with more successful results. They were not the only ones who had such designs. The Black Hand, who Princip was already friendly with, were already busy forming their own plans.
I need my coffee.
In Sarajevo, a prominent member of the organization, Daniel Ilić, sent Čebrinović a note, a newspaper, and already busy forming their own plans. In Sarajevo, a prominent member of the organization, Daniel Ilić, sent Čebrinović a note, a newspaper clipping regarding the Archduke's planned visit, and a single word in the margins, greetings. Čebrinović showed the paper to Princip, who had the same thought. This was their opportunity. This was not the young men's first encounter. Ilić and Princip were already friends, along with Čebrinović and all members of the Young Bosnia Group, a revolutionary anti-Austro-Hungary group. Ilić would later claim he coordinated the attack completely, although in truth he had been less the puppeteer than the puppet. From there, the 3 boys consulted Major Tankosić, a Serbian.
I never really realized how pathetically downtrodden the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Ottoman Empire were by the time of World War I. Germany was really on its own, it seemed, in being a competent power. And it seems like the Balkans are just this perfect powder keg, but all this unrest in sandwiched in between 2 old, large but feeble and dying empires to their north and south, or north and southeast. And so the conditions are just perfect, yeah.
An officer and one of the founders of the Black Hand.
For this stuff. Does that make sense?
Consulted Major Tankosić, a Serbian officer and one of the founders of the Black Hand, who agreed to provide the group with weapons to carry out the attempt. They sent word to Ilić, who immediately organized things in Bosnia itself, arranging to send 3 other young revolutionaries to meet the others in Sarajevo. Their names were Srećko Popović, Vaso Čubrilović, and Mehmed Bastić. Armed with 6 bombs, 4 pistols, and a cyanide pill, each to be taken immediately after the assassination, the 7 young Bosnians began their attempt. It was June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Aren't they supposed to put it in their cheek or something so that they can quickly, right after they shoot, because you could shoot and then be apprehended right away. So shoot and then chew the glass thing, and then you die, obviously.
And his wife, the Duchess Sophia, were to inspect a military garrison before traveling towards the city hall to open a new state museum. Daniel Ilić had positioned the assassins along their route, each young man armed with a bomb. But it turns out, killing is a lot easier in theory than in practice. First, the motorcade went past Mehmed Bastić, who lost his nerve and failed to throw his bomb. The same happened next with Čubrilović, who also failed to act when he saw the car coming. But the same cannot be said of Čebrinović. Didn't
it say it rolled off? So why not, if you're so scared, why not? I know I'm saying this all in hindsight, and I'm not like right there with my life on the line, and it's easier for me to think. I get it, but just kind of like roll it, just like casually. Nobody's gonna assume it's a bomb right away. I don't think. Maybe not.
When the car came down his part of the route, he summed up all the courage of a 19-year-old who had never seen war and threw his bomb, which promptly rolled off the back of the Archduke's car and under the wheels of the one behind in the motorcade, injuring around 20 people but killing none. What followed was more like a Looney Tunes episode than real life. Chabrinovich immediately swallowed his cyanide pill before jumping in the river. Unfortunately, the pills were old and ineffective, so rather than kill the young student, all it did was make him vomit. And rather than the river washing him away, Chabrinovich found himself standing in 13 centimeters of water as the river had dried up in the heat, before being dragged out by police and beaten up, before being taken into custody.
Yikes.
The rest vanished into the crowds and the confusion, disheartened and angry their attempt had failed. But unexpectedly for all of them, that wasn't the group's last chance at the Archduke. After hearing others had been injured by the bomb, Ferdinand changed his plans to visit the museum, deciding instead he wanted to travel to the hospital and check on the injured. But that message did not reach the Archduke's drivers, who continued with the original plan. Meanwhile, Gavrilo Princip was lamenting the group's failures at the nearby Moritz Schiller Cafe when a twist of fate changed the course of history. Almost directly in front of the young rebel, the car carrying the Archduke was told to stop, the driver being told of his error. When the car came to a stop and put into a slow reverse, Princip saw his chance. Summoning his courage, he pulled out the pistol Tankosich had given him, and at point-blank range, shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the neck and his wife Sophia in the abdomen immediately after. Both were dead before they reached the hospital. In the aftermath, 25 persons were implicated in the assassination. Mehmet Bastich escaped to Serbia, but the others were not so lucky. Being over 20 years old, Chabrilovic, Ilyich, and fellow conspirator Jovanovic were executed. And Princip, Chabrinovich, and Grebsha found themselves imprisoned at Theresienstadt, where all three would die in the next 4 years. Interviews with Princip, Chabrinovich, and Popovich during their trials showed that these three at least did not regret their actions, but they also didn't anticipate what would come next. Just a month later, diplomacy and civility between Serbia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire had broken down completely. Serbia, with the knowledge of new support from the Russian Empire, still acquiesced to some of these demands by Austro-Hungary that included suppressing propaganda against the empire and allowing their officials to join the Serbian inquiry into the assassination. But without a complete agreement, Austro-Hungary responded by breaking diplomatic relations. The Serbian army mobilized, assured of Russian support behind it. Austria-Hungary too did not stand alone, however, having nurtured a pact of alliance with the German Empire. Seeking to assure their ally, Kaiser Wilhelm II and his administration issued the infamous blank check to the Austro-Hungarian government, promising uncompromised assistance in their endeavors in the Balkans. Emboldened by their ally, on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, shelling the national capital of Belgrade that very night. What occurred in the days that followed was a near domino effect of hostility, as European powers and nations scrambled to honor pacts of friendship and alliance. Europe, as historian Christopher Clark has written, sleepwalked into war, triggered in earnest by an angry 19-year-old boy, Gavrilo Princip.
That was awesome. I think I'm gonna watch this one actually. That was a great video. I mean, simple history is always great, but yeah, really interesting. Keep on learning, guys. Let's do it. I'll see you guys next time. All right. If you're not doing well, don't worry, friend. Chin up. You'll be good soon. All right. Trust me. See you guys.